This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
And so, of course, we're establishing that. And part of that is something called Faithful Companions, where we can put them in touch with somebody on Zoom who will help them and act as a companion to them, helping them to grow, helping them to develop in the transitional stages, to be able to establish their prayer and so on and so forth. This is going to be a short-term help for them. And so who understands this more than the person who has gone through this already? Who understands it more? Who understands, that very first interaction with the mosque more than the person who has gone through this already? Who understands more about, cultural Islam and how that can be imposed upon you to the point where you lose your own sense of identity and who you are than the person who has gone through this already? So it's all about, finding like with like and the familiarity of all of these situations to converts who are there to help and give support. And you know yourself and your family better than anyone else. So be mindful of what it is that might cause conflict for you or pain to you within your family in terms of their understanding of your journey. And we also, we come with different learned experiences. A convert to Islam will never understand Islam or experience Islam in the same way as somebody who has been born into the faith, where there are lots of family dynamics and where there are lots of, there's a very strong cultural ethos within the family in relation to their faith and how they live it and how they perceive certain things in relation to their life and here in the UK and their work and their interaction with society at large. I'm just saying that in those stages of conversion and the understanding that's required to be helpful, sympathetic, empathetic with the person and try to lead them through that whole set of circumstances and situation in a way that allows them to remain being themselves and to help them to understand what's going on around them is really up to the converts.
Welcome to the Becoming Muslim podcast at ontoislam.com. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Batool. She's an Irish convert. She converted 40 years ago. And she is the founder of a foundation in the UK. It's called the Convert Muslim Foundation. So welcome to the show, Batool.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for a kind welcome.
Yes. Peace be upon you too, Batool. Thanks for coming on. So, Batool, tell us a little bit about your initiative there at the Convert Muslim Foundation.
Okay, so the Convert Muslim Foundation was established in around 2018, and it is the forerunner of the organization was the New Muslims Project, which was based at a place called the Islamic Foundation in Markfield in Leicester, and began in 1993. I started that at that particular Islamic organization in 1993 after having finished my studies in university studies, Islamic studies and comparative religions. And basically, the initial organization was set up to to support people who had converted to Islam, and to perhaps initially the main aim was to do research on people who had converted to Islam. However, when I arrived at the Islam Foundation to establish this organization back in 1993, I realized that actually there was little or no support services for converts to Islam at all over the UK. Now, to say that we might have been the first organization to establish this support service would be true to some extent, but it would be ungracious of me to say that there hadn't been some attempts to try and set up or to establish some support networks before then, kind of from back in the mid-1980s. So I think it's important that we acknowledge all of those efforts that were made, when we talk about the work that we do, rather than look at what we do as being the first or the first and foremost organization. We weren't really. The first group of people back in the mid-80s were a number of converts to Islam who held quite a number of organized meetings and events in the UK. One of them was in Birmingham. There were others up the country in Yorkshire and thereabouts. And a lot of the converts to Islam who were involved in it were actually, very new to Islam converts, and were very eager to try and help people like themselves who had come into Islam and who had also found that there was no support services or initiatives for them. And so, in fact, when I started at the Islamic Foundation, the New Muslim Project, I started producing a little magazine sent out to converts to Islam at that time all over the UK. And the name of it was Meeting Point. Now, Meeting Point, the first copy of Meeting Point had been produced back in about 1987 by this early group of converts to Islam, where they were looking at the possibilities of what they could establish and the reasons why it needed to be established, or these support services needed to be established, and so on. And these were the first sort of tentative meetings around the desire or the inspiration and aspirations of these people to build on something. However, some of the concerns were at that time that most of these converts to Islam had other jobs that they were working in for to provide for their own livelihood and their families and so on. And so they weren't able to give the time and energy to this new initiative that they had hoped they could. And so I think, when we started the New Muslims Project in 1993, and I was employed to do this work, then obviously it offered me a much more lucrative kind of position to be able to spearhead that kind of work and to get it established all over the UK, if possible. Although there were some, there was an organization called Leeds New Muslims, and they had been up and running and were doing quite well and really working very well within that localized area. And others were beginning to spring up here and there and realize that, this work was absolutely essential if we were to provide the necessary services for people who were interested in or who had converted to Islam, and to try and support them, guide them, and really to appreciate and understand their reality, and to be able to respond to that and build on it and help them to develop their spiritual path. You know, when we established ourselves in 1993, there were a few other small organizations, localized organizations, spearheaded by converts to Islam and helped by other Muslims from various different backgrounds who had come into the UK and settled in the UK. And they were also keen to help out and to support localized groups who wanted to provide for the education and training and general guidance for converts to Islam, or even people just inquiring about Islam. And since we started this work, since 1993 up to 2018, we could see very clearly that there was a very great interest and energy into trying to establish localized groups all over the UK, particularly in the larger cities and where the larger centralized mosques were up and running and probably trying to cater for quite a lot of the demands within the localized communities. And so a lot of these small localized organizations began to establish themselves and be recognized by the local Muslim community as the go-to organization for supporting people who were showing an interest in or who had wanted to convert to Islam. And so they began to, like ourselves, we began to provide various different things like Shahada certificates, which were not in vogue at all at the time. People just went to a mosque and made their Shahada, and that was it, essentially. No details were being kept, no forwarding addresses or contact details were being kept. And so we kind of set up a system whereby, you know, we had a database, we were building on the number of people that were contacting us by phone, that were requesting Shahada certificates, some of them whom had converted to Islam for a number of years, but had never had a Shahada certificate, and really just wanted something to record, you know, such an enormously important event in their lives. And also, of course, if they were going on Hajj or Umrah, they needed to be able to present this to the Saudi embassy or through their the Hajj and Umrah travel tour operator. They needed to be able to present a Shahada certificate so that the tour operator could present it to the Saudi embassy in order to be able to get visas for them to go on Hajj, particularly if they had not changed their names on converting to Islam. And of course, that was something that we picked up on and began to advise people that, of course, they didn't have to change their names and shouldn't really change their names unless there was some obvious concern about their names and what it meant and so on. But then no mother is going to give her child a name that doesn't have a beautiful meaning. So we wanted to encourage people to retain their names after making their Shahada and after conversion to Islam. And so the Shahada certificate was very important. The other reason why it was important here in the UK was to leave it with a will, last will and testament with their solicitors so that the family would adhere to Islamic rites when it came to funerals and hospitalization and so on. And so that the person who had converted to Islam, even if the family were still quite, upset or annoyed about this, that they would have to adhere to the Islamic rites in order to deal with the funerals. So the Shahada certificate was quite important. We also had things like Shahada gift packs, where we put together a pack of books. They weren't always necessarily the right book because it's very difficult to come across or to locate the right kind of books for people who are new to Islam. But we tried to get books that had a long shelf life, that were good publications, rather than just a little bag of leaflets that really, were not very helpful and not lasting in terms of the educational value of these things. So we had a really quite a good gift pack of books, which cost in the region of about £150 to £200, and that was given away free to each convert to Islam that sought a Shahada certificate or who came to us in order to make their own Shahada at the Islamic Foundation. We also established the newsletter, which was the meeting point. And the newsletter was a really great success. It's not still running at the moment, although it's possible that we will look at setting it up again, although perhaps online, because the cost of producing it and posting it and so on in a hard copy was quite high, and we didn't really have the resources financially and otherwise. But the meeting point itself was a really good little magazine. We always tried to keep it localized in the sense that it was about Islam and conversion to Islam in the UK. People often suggested to us that we should be addressing some of the problems across the world with Muslims, but I refused to go outside of the UK. I felt that this was specifically for converts to Islam here in the UK, and there were lots of other organizations dealing with other issues and concerns around the world, and this was specifically for converts and their families. So the newsletter itself was kept quite local, interesting, contextualized to Islam in Britain and the lives of converts to Islam in Britain. The articles were quite interesting, quite light, and it was the kind of magazine that you could really easily leave on your coffee table when your non-Muslim family came around, and they would enjoy reading it and enjoy reading the articles in it. We also set up a kind of an annual get-together, a gathering of the convert care groups around the UK, so that we could look at best practice and try to see what it was we could do based on the trials and tribulations that others had gone through to make our journey and our work more accessible, easier, more important, and sort of realistic for the convert community here in the UK. So there were lots of things, and we had lots of different events that we set up for families, for the converts generally, to try and bring them together and to create a kind of a convert community atmosphere, and to develop the convert community here in the UK. And it has always been important for us not to go down the line of segregation that seemed to have been imposed upon us by other Muslim communities running along very sectarian lines who came into the UK and have always tried to implement a kind of a cultural approach to Islam that would be more comfortable back in their own countries rather than here in the UK. And particularly for converts to Islam, where, we have non-Muslim family members who often like to accompany a convert to the mosque or to an event and so on, and where segregation is just, it's just one of these ridiculous things that causes the family to feel left out and marginalized, and leave the convert having to try and respond to awkward questions and discomfort of the family. And, that's not something we want to accommodate or entertain.
Can you explain the segregation a bit more? Do you mean like the segregation of the sexes?
Yes, I mean the segregation of the sexes. I mean, where Muslims, when they used to attend meetings, not so much now here in the UK, it's becoming an awful lot better. But back in the 90s, 80s and 90s, there was a kind of a strict segregation imposed where women would be in a separate rooms or a separate venue to the men, and would not be able to access the direct contact with speakers in the same way as the men could, and were sort of kept out of sight. And, you know, when something is kept out of sight, it's kept out of mind. And so women didn't have really great contact with speakers at events and so on, which meant that they weren't really learning in the same way as the men were learning and didn't have the same access. So, and of course, in the mosque as well. Of course, the mosque is a slightly different thing, but because mosques here in the UK were not built they were built with segregation in mind. And in many cases, mosques in the UK were built and architecturally built women out of the mosque rather than into the mosque. We now have organizations and so on that are challenging this hugely, and things are changing very slightly. But from our work at the New Muslims Project and currently with the Convert Muslim Foundation, we are not in favor of, nor do we promote segregation in any way, shape or form. Even in the mosque that we usually frequent for events and so on, the women pray behind the men without any kind of barriers and without any kind of segregation in that sense.
Yeah. And why do you think it is that new Muslims will find this strange, this segregation that they find in the mosques?
Well, I mean, you know, we're not brought up to be segregated. I mean, unless you are a Catholic like I was in Ireland when I was a child. I mean, we had schools that were segregated, primary schools and so on. Segregated in the sense that young boys sat to one side of the classroom, young girls sat to the other side of the classroom, and we had our own separate areas for play in the playground. But that in itself is not segregation. It's kind of respectful, differences of areas in order for young people to be able to sit and to appreciate what's going on. But we always had the ability to be able to understand and appreciate, how the other gender thinks and how they respond to certain situations and how they understand each other. And that's so important for us as we grow up, as young people, as teenagers, and as people who are looking forward to getting married and so on, that we need to be able to understand each other. We need to be able to appreciate and acknowledge our differences and to be able to discuss and debate and look at how difference is seen by the different genders. I think that we here in the UK, we have seen where segregation within the Muslim community has caused huge problems in relation to the total lack of understanding that young men have of young women and vice versa. And this doesn't bode well when it comes to marriage and family life. I mean, if the first instance of your understanding of the opposite gender is, in the first weeks and months of your marriage, then I think you're going to come across some serious problems trying to relate to the other person. So, I think we have experienced quite, serious problems here in the UK because of segregation. And I think it's something that's been brought into the country by people of other cultures. And actually, the people of other cultures, say, if you go to the Arab world in particular, or to Muslim communities in other parts of the world, you won't find this strict segregation. I think it's when people come to a country that's predominantly non-Muslim. And then they set up all kinds of barriers in order to try to protect themselves, to protect the faith of their children and their families and so on. And in doing so, they tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater and put certain things in place that really, don't bode well for the future development of the community. But the problem is when that is being brought into a country that's predominantly non-Muslim, where people from various parts of the Muslim world have settled due to education or work or, financial issues and problems, or asylum seekers and so on, and where they tend to start directing Islam within that particular country or that particular mosque or town or community where they live, according to the standards back in their own country, which, will not sit comfortably for the people who are living in that part of the world, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, or whether they're even interested in Islam. It doesn't sit comfortably and causes all sorts of issues and problems and concerns, really, about how the Muslim community is conducting itself.
Yeah, I believe it drives people away from the mosques too, and even away from Islam. And that's why these sort of foundations, which you guys have organized, are perfect for the converts.
Well, I mean, the Convert Muslim Foundation was established in 2018, and really the reasons for that is because I felt, having worked as somebody who was supporting all the services and establishing services for converts to Islam here in the UK, and building that and building on our relationships with all of the localized groups of care providing services. I felt that we had reached a stage where we have now got a kind of critical mass of converts to Islam who no longer ride on the coattails of all of these cultural groups here in the UK, who felt that they had the right answers to everything to do with Islam and how we as converts should live Islam here in the UK. And so we needed to have a shift of emphasis, to be honest, in the sense that, as converts to Islam, we really needed to look to ourselves now as to how we wish to proceed into the future as a convert Muslim community here in the UK. How are we going to develop that community? How are we going to build, the community to be able to speak for and respond to our own needs and concerns, so that we're building an Islam that sits comfortably, not just with ourselves and our non-Muslim families, but in the wider society here in the UK. And it is about developing leadership within the convert community and so on, and being able to take responsibility for ourselves. If we look back on the Muslim community here in the UK, that's been predominantly commandeered or led by the South Asian community, between Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Indian communities here in the UK. I feel so sad that we allowed the interpretation of Islam that they, sort of established here in the UK to go on for so long, and that it was never challenged, not even by other Muslim communities who came into the UK, like North African, Arab, Far Eastern Asian communities, and so on. And it was allowed to continue. Mosques were allowed to continue to operate along sectarian lines, dictation as to who came to the mosque, who was allowed into the mosques, who was allowed into the lines of prayer. how Eid was celebrated, how funerals were conducted, how marriages were conducted. I mean, it was just quite ridiculous, really. And so, none of this sat easily with converts to Islam, particularly if you came from a religious background where you had been maybe a Catholic or whatever religion you had been born into or your family followed, where there was a kind of organization around these rites of passage, like funerals and marriages and so on and so forth. Whereas when you came to the Muslim community, it was pretty much very chaotic, very disorganized, and so on. And so it was up to us, and is up to us as converts to Islam, to establish, how we wish these things to be conducted, so that our non-Muslim families can see that that it's not a chaotic, kind of madness that takes place, but that everything is organized and, fits or sits more neatly into the organized communities and social, setup that we have here in the UK.
Yeah. Have you set up any places of worship, like mosques or anything, where the converts can pray together?
No, that was one of the things that we decided against, although there has been some arguments about this and about how the mosque is not really a useful or helpful place for convert community to access help and support. We are trying to work with the mosques because my feeling is that, it's not in the spirit of Islam to start establishing or erecting new mosques. It's about trying to change the mindset of mosques that are already established and trying to look at how we can speak to them, negotiate with them, talk to them, and make them more aware and generally build some empathy as to how to deal with converts to Islam. Because here in the UK, women have not been allowed into mosques for prayers and so on for so many years, and there are still quite a few mosques who don't allow women in. But because of this, some women's mosques have been established. Now, personally, I don't really think that is the way to go. It's not in the spirit of Islam. I don't think the Prophet ﷺ would like to see the communities being divided along gender lines. And I think it's more about how we can work with already established mosques and change perceptions and change mindsets. And that's happening to some degree because, we're sort of 5-6 generations down now from the early sort of arrival of Muslims in Britain from the South Asian communities. And so things are changing, but I think far too slowly for the rate of change in other situations and circumstances that's going on around us.
Okay, so let's now talk about your foundation, the Convert Muslim Foundation. I'm just reading something now off the homepage. It says, we offer a fresh and innovative approach to caring for converts to Islam, offering a range of support, advice, and services. So you mentioned there we offer a fresh and innovative approach. So what is fresh and innovative about it?
Okay, so I spent probably 25 to 30 years working at the New Muslim Project and providing the basic services that we provided for those new to Islam, the Shahada certification, the Shahada gift packs, events, family events, Ramadan retreats, the newsletter, all of these things. Which all developed and sort of grew and sort of, developed out of the various different suggestions and discussions we would continuously have with converts to Islam over the years. Now, like I said, the convert community here in the UK have reached its own critical mass, and it's about the future. So because we have so many convert care facilities now working in towns and cities all over the UK, there's no longer a need for us to provide the basic essentials that people need when they convert to Islam, or when they're coming into Islam. Of course, we have to continue with some of those, and we have to think of other innovative ways in which we can do that. For instance, obviously now the pandemic and the outcome of the pandemic has meant that a lot of us do things online and use Zoom and all sorts of other technical facilities to be able to contact people all over the country. So first of all, my interest was in looking at, what is the future of the convert community? What do we need to do for the existing convert community, and the possibilities of its growth and development over the next 20 to 30 years. So we have to build capacity. We have to build leadership within our community. The knowledge, not just the basic knowledge needed for transitioning into Islam, but knowledge in the sense that we are looking at all sorts of the knowledge required for us as a small Muslim community. I mean, there's only 3 million or maybe 3.5 million Muslims here in the UK, as opposed to 65 million approximately non-Muslims. So we're living in a predominantly non-Muslim country. How does this affect our fiqh? How does this affect us as a small community? How does this affect our community in relation to marriages and family life? There are lots of our Muslim men who are getting married to non-Muslim women who may have been born into Christian faith but don't necessarily practice it now. A lot of our scholars would object to this. But the very fact that we are 3 million Muslims in the midst of 65, 67 million non-Muslims, what are the chances of meeting a non-Muslim for marriage? And this is for men who have a way out of this situation, albeit maybe stretched to some extent, looking at Islamic principles. What about women? What about Muslim women? Are Muslim women to be denied the right to fulfill their own needs? And how do we address aspects of Quranic principles about Muslim women and who they should or shouldn't marry? Here in the UK, we have many Muslim women who are getting married to non-Muslim men. Do we close the door on them? Do we shut them out? Do we deny them access to the mosque? What do we do? So as a very small community, we have to be looking at, these situations and looking at ourselves as a minority community. How does the Islamic law and jurisprudence deal with these situations? And please don't tell me that there is no way past this. There has to be a way past this, because Islam, if we look at Islamic law, it is not a stagnant pond. It is a way to water. It is a gushing waterway that, generates vegetation as it flows through to, various different parts of the country and the world and so on and so forth. So it's not stagnant. We must deal with these situations and circumstances. Otherwise, the problem is going to, the problems that are going to manifest themselves in the future are going to be huge. So anyway, going back, sorry, just get carried away with some of these issues because, if you're running an organization and you're at the end of a phone line, all of these problems come to you. And, we can't stick our heads in the ground and pretend they don't exist. We have to deal with them. And the Prophet ﷺ would demand that we deal with them, and that society and the Muslim community looks at ways and means of addressing these concerns. With the Convert Muslim Foundation, so we're going away, not necessarily totally from the transitional stages of Islam and how to help and support converts to Islam. And I get phone calls here all of the time. But we have to look at ways and means of supporting them that are new and innovative. And so we have set up now several different projects. One of them is we now are building a website where we are hosting all of the convert care facilities around the whole of the UK. Why? Because we do not want converts to Islam going into the internet, surfing the internet, picking up on maybe websites that are very dubious, that can lead them down radicalized or, sort of very radical paths to Islam. And we want them to enjoy what it is to be a Muslim, to learn and to grow and to develop their sense of spirituality and their relationship with God in the nicest possible manner, that they can wrap seamlessly around their lives and around their work and their non-Muslim, companions, friends, work colleagues, family, and so on here in the UK. Not something that's dry and prescriptive and leads them down a kind of a one-way path, or a very sort of blinkered understanding of Islam. And so, of course, we're establishing that. And part of that is something called Faithful Companions, where we can put them in touch with somebody on Zoom who will help them and act as a companion to them, helping them to grow, helping them to develop in the transitional stages, to be able to establish their prayer and so on and so forth. This is going to be a short-term help for them. And they will find the website on the computer, and they will be able to go in and explore what each of these convert care services have, what they provide, and in relation to their geographical location here in the UK, what access they will have to that organization or to that facility. We're looking also at research and publications. And so we have already got an established relationship with the university here in the UK, where we're going to start researching aspects of conversion to Islam, not the transitional stages, because this has been done to death already. But one of the research projects we are going to start now very soon. In fact, I was just signing the MOU with the university about an hour ago, is looking at converts who have been involved in leadership positions here in the UK in various different organizations, both religious and non-religious, and how these converts to Islam have changed the perceptions of Islam in Britain, or who have tried to build into their work and their leadership position a different perception of Islam, one that sits more comfortably in the UK, that's socially more interactive, acceptable, appealing, and so on. And that's just one of our things. Another project we're looking at is resettlement and rehabilitation. We have an enormous amount of Muslims in prison here in the UK, which shamefully is higher per capita in the Muslim community than in the rest of the society, and much higher per capita in relation to the Muslim community within the rest of society here. So this is not an area of work that a lot of Muslim organizations want to be involved in, but it is a shameful hallmark on the Muslim community that this is the situation. Within, we have about 90 and 100,000 prisoners in the whole of the UK. That's not counting Scotland. And of those 90 to 100,000, there is at least 15,000 Muslims in prison. Of those 15,000 Muslims in prison, 1/3 or almost 1/3 of those are converts to Islam who have converted to Islam while fulfilling their prison sentence here in the UK. In other words, they have gone into prison as a non-Muslim and are coming out of prison as a Muslim. What do we do for those converts, and how do we rehabilitate them, resettle them back into a society, and particularly with regards to interacting and integration into the Muslim community where they have never had any interaction before? So this is a huge area that we're very concerned about. And in fact, this morning I was talking to somebody about the publication of a report that we want to do based on an event that we had some months back, looking at the whole prison situation and how we as a convert community can start looking at how we support these converts to Islam who are coming out of prison and who will face certain stigmas, even within the Muslim community, in spite of the fact that they have paid their debt to society for whatever trouble they got into and why they were in prison in the first instance. But, we have situations here where people will not stand next to them in the prayer hall because they have been to prison. And this is a shame on the Muslim community because, as we know, as Muslims, when you repent sincerely and you are forgiven for the situation, and these people have repented, and we hope sincerely, although this is another aspect of the whole thing that we'll have to enter into, we would hope that the Muslim community would not apply stigma and labels on these people that will stick and make life extremely difficult for them when they come out of prison. That's another one. And also we're looking at mental health and well-being and leadership and development of the convert community. And I hope, inshallah, these are the new innovative ways that we're looking at our community, and we're looking at it in the long term. What will be the circumstances of the convert community in another 10 years' time, 2030, and trying to take it to 2050 and be able to deal with the future and the future prospects and our aspirations for Islam in Britain in between now and then, inshallah, God willing.
That's great. Yeah. It looks like you guys are really busy over there doing a lot of good work. There's another part that I want to read here. It's from your About Us page, and it says the Convert Muslim Foundation is led by converts to Islam, all of who have extensive experience of supporting people interested in Islam and those embracing the faith. Okay, so my question is, why is it important that the converts learn from other converts?
Well, I think, we all have gone through an experience that has taught us a lot about ourselves, particularly, about our relationship with God and how we have managed to establish that for those who come into the faith without necessarily having a faith background. Although they may have been born into a faith, their families and themselves might not have practiced that faith for, a number of years, maybe for a whole lifetime, really. And we also, we come with different learned experiences. a convert to Islam will never understand Islam or experience Islam in the same way as somebody who has been born into the faith, where there are lots of family dynamics and where there are lots of, there's a very strong cultural ethos within the family in relation to their faith and how they live it and how they perceive certain things in relation to their life and here in the UK and their work and their interaction with society at large. Converts to Islam have been brought up, socialized, educated, in different ways, differently to the born Muslim communities. And sometimes there's a very deep and gaping lack of understanding for the convert to Islam. I mean, even for, we're just talking about prisoners there. I mean, can you imagine somebody going into prison, having committed some kind of crime, and their family are quite upset and annoyed maybe, or maybe their family are accustomed to this and, they're not so, surprised or annoyed by the situation. But generally speaking, people who went to prison, the family will be upset or about the situation and the circumstances for that particular member of the family. But can you imagine that they come out of prison, not just the fact that they have been in there and that they're, the stigmas attached to that, but they come out as a Muslim as well. I mean, talk about double jeopardy. This is just, piling on one difficulty on top of another. So, and that's just for people who come out of prison. For people who convert to Islam in normal circumstances here in the UK, families have difficulties with coping with that and dealing with the person within the family who have chosen to step out of the family norm and start looking at something that is not familiar to the family's, upbringing and understanding and so on, is quite alien, actually. And given the very bad press that we get here in the UK and around the Muslim world, I'm sure, through the media. And let's face it, as Muslims, we don't actually help ourselves very well in these circumstances. Then, people have a very skewed kind of appreciation or understanding of Islam in the first instance. So to have a family member wanting to explore this or go down this particular route can be quite shocking to the family, and lots of obstacles can be put up and be put in front of the potential convert. And so who understands this more than the person who has gone through this already? Who understands it more? Who understands, that very first interaction with the mosque more than the person who has, has gone through this already? Who understands more about, cultural Islam and how that can be imposed upon you to the point where you lose your own sense of identity and who you are than the person who has gone through this already? So it's all about, finding like with like, and the familiarity of all of these situations to converts who are there to help and give support. So I think, and that's not ruling out that born Muslims can be helpful and so on and so forth. They can and they will. And I don't want to sort of sound as though I'm segregating the community. I'm not. I'm just saying that in those stages of conversion and the understanding that's required to be helpful, sympathetic, empathetic with the person and try to lead them through that whole set of circumstances and situation in a way that allows them to remain being themselves and to help them to understand what's going on around them is really up to the converts. When I say that we have these faithful companions facility that we're already in the process of establishing. And the reason why it's slow is because of safeguarding. We have to safeguard everyone who comes into our organization, and we have to have a safeguarding process built around this so that we protect everybody and they all feel that they are able to discuss and speak in a safe space, and a space that is that would not cause them in any way, shape, or form any difficulty or any concern. And so that's really what's preventing us to have this up and running by now. It is on its way, but it's incumbent upon us as an organization to protect everybody, both the person who's looking for the guidance and the volunteer who's going to provide that guidance. And of course, within that volunteer network, we have Muslims of every background, converts, born Muslims, and so on and so forth. But we feel also the importance and the significance of the training that we have to provide to everybody who's volunteering for this in relation to how they deal with the person, how they guide the person, how they use some of the training that we will be giving them to understand and to appreciate where that person is coming from. That's why I would say that the organization is run predominantly by converts, and the trustees are all converts to Islam from a diverse background. Not all of our spiritual advisors are, but I think 2 or 3 of them are. And so, I think they have the understanding and they have the appreciation of what it is the organization is trying to do in order to be able to support and help us, reach our goals.